this is David for Big Bits, and in this video we're going to take a look at comparing the time of particular bars on charts so that we can compare different securities. Now in this particular example I created a specific indicator just for this. You might have already seen me publish this if you follow me on TradingView. Otherwise I'll give you kind of a quick breakdown on how this actually works. We're going to be looking at one security and comparing it to another, as just the title sounds, and then we are going to get the percentage change within that candle, so from open to close on both of the securities, and then we're going to compare the change in percentage points. And so for example, if Bitcoin gained 10% on the day, and we're using Bitcoin as our base market and Ethereum as our other market to compare to, if Bitcoin gained 10% and Ethereum gained 5%, we would have a green bar of 5% for Bitcoin because it outperformed Ethereum by 5%. Now, the exact opposite is true. If Ethereum had gained 10% and Bitcoin had only gained 5%, the difference would be a -5 or a red bar of 5, -5. So in order to do this and compare any security, we had to look at the time of the bars that we're working with, because of course many markets close and cryptocurrency markets don't really close, so we needed a way to be able to compare them and make sure it was fair. There were some discrepancies I had noticed to where the bar times weren't really starting the same, so I required that the bars start at the same time when you're using a particular time frame. That way you're always comparing the correct time frame, and you might miss out on some data when the markets don't quite align perfectly, but for the most part, as long as there is a match on the bar time when they start, it should work pretty well. So let's go ahead and dive into this. I'm going to show you the settings. We have a base market. You can choose from some built-in options, and the other market is exactly the same way. You can check this to use a custom base market, but you're going to have to type in the TradingView symbol that you see up here in order to do that. And that is so that the security function that we're using in PineScript knows which symbol to actually call. Otherwise, if you don't check that and write one in, it's just going to use one of these built-in strings. Now, other than that, I think that pretty much covers what you're seeing here. I've already talked about how it works, and we need to focus on time, so let's do that. I've got the chart pulled up here. I believe my head isn't in the way. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on. If you haven't seen the video that I've done where I talk about functions and strings, it's a good idea to go back through the series and look at that, because otherwise this code might not make sense. Essentially, we had to create a function for our base and our other to return a string, because we have the option to use a custom one and to type in that value. So if this is checked, it's going to return the custom string that they use for their input, and if they don't use the custom string, it'll just use the default first option from that drop-down list. So the reason we do that there instead of actually within the single line of code here is because you can't do the evaluation within the security function. So we call that first. We use our function within getSecurity. It's going to return that string here. Plus it's also best practice, I should say, to create a function, because we're going to be using that in other places. So it's a good idea to use that as a function so that you can reuse that code later instead of having to type all the evaluation out over and over. Okay, back to the point. We are going to be calling the security. We need to get its close. We need to get its open for the current time frame, the current resolution. So you can do this also with intraday time frames such as 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 minute, whatever you have the option for on TradingView. Now, once we have that data, we can calculate the percentage change, and that's a pretty easy calculation, and I'm not going to go over how to actually do that. You can see that in the code for the indicator if you need to. Now what we are also going to do, you'll notice, is we are also going to capture the bar closing time, or well, I use this as the reference for creating the variable name. It's not actually the closing time of the bar. If you do a control click on that time built-in variable there, it's the current bar time in Unix format. Now, I've also covered Unix time in great detail in another video, So if you want to go back and learn about what Unix time is and how to use that, then go back and check that video. For now, we're just going to be talking about how we're using that to compare. So essentially, it's looking at the bars and it's getting their time for the bar. That way, when we compare it to another one, we make sure they actually compare in the same time and there's not some sort of mismatch and the comparisons don't actually work. Okay, so we've got all of our data, we've gotten our percentage changes, we've gotten our absolute values if we needed those, and we've made them negative if it was necessary. So if our base change was less than the other, since it returns an absolute value based on the way that this needs to work to get the correct value, we then had to multiply it by -1. So just ignore that math. Just know that it works. If you're curious about it, you can always dig into it for yourself. But now when it comes time to actually plot the percentage difference down here, we did have to do something. And I'm actually going to show you the result of this. Let's go ahead and look at SPX. Okay, there you can see there are now some gaps in the data. And that's because it's not plotting that data. And this is what I've been talking about. This is the reason why we've gotten the time variable, is so that when we compare one to the other, we will know the percentage difference based on the actual time frame that we're looking at and not something that it doesn't have data for or it doesn't align perfectly with. So this makes sure that we're working with the correct data when we compare it. So because those markets do close, there are gaps, and you will have those issues when you're working with those. But for the most part, if you want to see the data, it's going to be there. Now, what we do to compare these is we make sure that we actually have a base change and another change. This is those percentage changes. Then we also make sure that we do have a closing time for those candles, or those bars, should I say. If there isn't one, then we obviously don't have anything to compare it to, so we're not going to plot anything. But we also need to check that the closing, or that the time for those bars from the base and the other also match. So if they don't match, and that's what this means, if the base time does not equal to the other time, we are going to set our percentage difference to an NA value, which basically means null, and it's not going to plot anything on the chart. Once we do that, all we had to do was plot this on the chart, and if it's above 0, it's nice and green, and if it's below 0, it's red. It's a pretty simple plot. It's very easy. Other than that, that's about all there is to doing this and working with time. Now I wanted to show you actually how the time works. So we're going to be plotting the time of the candles here. Let's go ahead and save this. It'll reset to our default values. And you'll notice these numbers are very high. That's because it's Unix time. It's one integer for every second since like 1970. So these values are very high at this time. We're looking at daily charts, and you can see how these kind of compare here from one to the other. The blue, let's see, where is the data window? I always forget to pull this up. There we go. I always forget about this, but this is actually pretty handy. The data window, you can see the values of all the plots you have. So when we're comparing these, and you can't really see anything on the chart, let me do this. All you can really see are these blue lines because our percentage changes are scaled down so small that you really can't even see them. So you can see when we hover over the different bars here, the plot values for the different times match, and that's because we required them to. So let's go ahead and change this to where we're comparing it to the SPX again. And it's kind of hard to tell. So for example, and I can't really move the cursor right here, but in the data window on the right, where we were just looking before, you can see the plot value from the first blue plot to the second blue plot don't match. So in this particular candle, there's not going to be a bar. So let's actually take a look. It's this green candle here on the daily chart. Let's go ahead, go back in the code. Let's close those plots off, comment them out, save our data, switch back to the SPX, and make sure that there's actually no data showing on that green candle and that the time comparison works. There you go. their times for the bars didn't match, so it didn't print anything because it wasn't really fair to compare at that point. Okay, so that pretty much does it for this video. There's a pretty long video. It wasn't really a whole lot to cover, but if you're interested in actually using this indicator, it's publicly available on TradingView. All you have to do is search for it. I went to the wrong thing there, my bad. So all you have to do is search for it. It's the any security versus any security change comparison, and like I said, it compares their change percentages within whatever time frame you're looking at. So it's actually pretty cool. It kind of gives you an idea of how things do versus one another, and you might be able to spot trends here over longer periods of time perhaps, but it's really just kind of cool to see that on particular days, like the stock market crash the last few days. If you wanted to, you could compare how Bitcoin compared to that if they have the data available. So even though the price dropped on Bitcoin this day, it didn't drop nearly as much as the stock market, so it actually outperformed by 2.8%. That's pretty cool. So like I said, you can always look at that in the public library, or you can check out my TradingView profile. You can always follow me on there. I don't have a follow button because I'm looking at my own profile, but you can always do that. You can go to the scripts section. You can see all the scripts that I've created. You can check out all of those, and also if you are considering a paid plan, please check out the referral link in the description for the video. I'm really not one to shill these sort of things, but if you're going to consider a paid plan, please consider using the referral link because it does help me, and it'll also give you a $30 credit too. So I would really appreciate that. The plans are pretty expensive. But other than that, I think that covers it for the video. We've talked about everything. Yeah. So also, if you like the video, please like, and also you might as well subscribe because I do these videos and videos like this pretty often. You're gonna get a lot of great information, and if you want to, always go back and check the previous videos for something you might have missed. But other than that, thank you and have a nice day.